In my last three screencasts, I've been focusing on using the Visual Studio tools to build AX reports. And you've seen me manipulate the UI, move things around, drag nodes, and I mentioned things like report models, blah, blah, blah. But what I'd like to do now is actually go back and spend some time talking about the concepts, because this is what we've found to be a perennial source of confusion with developers who are now moving into using SSRS with AX. And the reason this is important and the source of the confusion is that there are concepts about reports, words, and ideas about reporting that are SSRS, and there's a whole set of terminology and concepts and tooling that we built that are specific to how AX uses SSRS. So if you're an SSRS user, some of this will be a little bit unfamiliar to you. But it's important you understand, because to bridge the gap, you need to have an understanding of these concepts and what the difference is between what we talk about as reporting in AX and how that maps to concepts in SSRS. And that's what this screencast is all about. So let's start with the very first thing. I showed you how to create this thing called a report library. Right? Do you remember that? That was just when I went to Visual Studio and created a new reporting project. Now, what was in the report library, I said, were report models. Not reports, but report models. Okay? And in essence, you can have 1 to n of, any number of these, right? And what is in a report model? A specific one, right? Let's draw an arrow here. Let's just draw to one of these. What is in a specific one? Well, there are 5 things, right? And you saw those in the nodes in the Visual Studio. The first is a collection of data sets, okay? And that's where we're going to get data that's going to feed into the report. Then there are designs. Okay, and designs, again, are layouts. How data is rendered to a page, how data sets are rendered into some medium. There are parameters. And you saw a parameter in one of the previous screencasts get automatically created from an AX query. They can be automatically created, and I can add my own. There was a node I didn't explore called data methods. Data methods, long and short, is those are static C# methods that can be used by the report. And they can be used in many ways by the report. I'll just ignore them for right now. And then there are images. And of course, you understand what this means. These are just embedded images that are used by the reports. So again, I want to be clear. This is a report model, not a report. I often make the mistake of just calling it a report, but it really is a report model. Okay? And I'll show you later how this maps to the SQL SSRS concept of a report. So the next thing we need to explore is this, we'll call it the datasets node. Right? And a dataset gets data from something. Let me drag this thing in here. Whoops, I have some spurious arrows that I need to disconnect. Okay, got rid of them. Now, and let me connect the data set and show you that it's one of that collection, right? So what is in a single data set? You can think of a data set as a reference to some data source. Okay, and I'll talk to you what the data sources can be. And relative to that data source, there are a collection of, n fields. It's very simple, right? You saw in the query that I used in the previous screencasts, there were 3 fields, right? So the data source was an AX query, and there are 3 fields. I haven't shown it to you yet, but there are actually other kinds of data sources. You saw that there were things called AX queries, right? That can be a data source, right? You saw, what I didn't show you rather, was that we can actually directly query a SQL database. And that too can become a data source. Right? This is just a normal SQL table or view or whatever. We can also query an SSAS database, OLAP data, a cube. That is also a possible data source. And then there's something that's kind of interesting with our report models, which is, remember these data methods here, those C# static methods? You can actually create data on the fly using those methods. And we can use it as a data source from the report. So you can just, and what you'll do is you'll create a data system.data.data table and feed it in. Or you can connect to a web service or connect to a database. So it's a very powerful programmatic method of generating data. And it has a lot of uses in AX reports. Let me fix this. There we go. Okay, so we went from report library, which contains report models. Report model has these 5 elements: data sets, designs, parameters, data methods, images. And we talked a little about data sources. The next most important concept is a design. And again, the design is a layout. Right? It defines how data is rendered to a page of some kind. Okay? And being a design, it contains a header, contains a footer. It defines what's going to appear in the header and what's going to appear in the footer. And of course, it contains a body. Right? And bodies of a specific design contain some number of things called data regions. Okay? And generally, you'll at least have one data region in a body in a design. And a data region is very simple. A data region is simply the binding of a data set, right, to some visualization. And by visualization, I don't necessarily mean a chart, though it can be that. It could mean a matrix, or a table, or a list, a bar chart, a pie chart, anything, one of those things. Those are all ways of visualizing a data set. Okay? Now, another important thing that I want to mention at this point is that this report model contains these collections, right? So these things are all shared among the elements of the report model. And what that means is, if I define a data set of customers here, all the designs can get data from there, right? They're shared. If I define a parameter called foo here, all the designs will use that parameter foo. You can't even actually not use it. It's defined across all the designs. If I define a data method, it can be used by the designs or the data sets or the parameters, etc. Images are shared across everything. So that's important to realize, because that later on you'll see how that's going to save you time when you want to share things. Okay? Now finally, the question we came here to answer was, how does this relate to a SQL report? So at the very simplest sense, a SQL report is a report RDL file, right? Like you install some RDL schema, and you define some RDL schema, and you persist some XML on the report server. So how does this translate to RDL files? Is a report library, does that get transformed into an RDL file? Is it a report model? Is it a data set? Is it a design? Well, the answer is it is a design, right? Every design here, if you have one design, will create essentially an RDL file. If you have 2 designs, it'll be 2. Okay? So now that you know that, let's go and try to talk about the different kinds of designs. Okay? And you already saw me create an auto design, but there are actually 2. A design can be either an auto design or a precision design. An auto design, if you're familiar with RDL and you looked at the XML in the Moxel for the auto design, you'd see something that sort of made sense. It isn't RDL, but you can understand how our system can transform it into RDL. If you look at a precision design, which you can see I've put in parentheses here, it is really embedded RDL. It's not complete RDL. It's basically the header, body, and footer of a RDL. And we, for the most part, take that embedded RDL, combine it with the other shared components, and spit out the full RDL. So in both these cases, RDL is created, right? In the auto design case, the RDL is fully created from the auto design. From the precision design, this fragment of embedded RDL is combined with the other information we have with these shared components, and the final RDL is rendered. And in both cases, we either preview that RDL in Visual Studio, or later on, and I'll show you this, it is deployed to the report server and then rendered. Okay, so please review this screencast and get a sense of these concepts. They'll become more clear as I continue the series, but understand this and understand the difference between the AX concepts, which are basically the libraries, the models, the data sets, and the designs, and the SQL concepts, which are more around just the RDL. Okay? So that's it for this screencast. See you next time.